Today we have been doing functions, and we talked yesterday about direct variation. Today we're graphing lines. So these would be linear equations. They're called linear equations because they form a line. But we're going to graph using slope intercept form for now. Slope intercept form. So you should be familiar with this. You've done it before. It's y equals mx plus b. That's our form. Now y is considered a dependent variable. It's dependent because its value is determined by x. Alright, so this m, and just the m, not the x with it, is the slope. And we can think of slope as rise, up and down, over run, left and right. We can also think of it as change in y, that's what that little triangle means, change in y over change in x. This b represents the y-intercept. And we need to remember a y-intercept is where a graph crosses the y-axis. Or a plot, I said graph, but where a plot crosses the y-axis. So before we jump into actually using this form, we're going to talk about how to get slope and how to use slope. And again, this should be familiar, so if it is, that's excellent. Don't fall asleep. Alright, so let's say I have 2 points. Let's say 5, negative 3. Let's call that point A. Let's say point B is negative 1, negative 8. And I want to find the slope between those points. Well, slope is change in y over change in x. And when you see change in, you should think subtract. So a formula we could use would be y1 minus y2 over x1 minus x2. Sometimes you see this switched where it's 2 first. As long as you're consistent, it doesn't matter. I just always like doing the first point minus the second point. It's just easier, because that's the order I see them in. So, I need to remember, though, y is on top. Okay? Because we're going to deal with our y's first. So, I'm going to do negative 3, because that's my y1, and my y2 is negative 8. So, I'm subtracting. So minus negative 8 all over 5 minus negative 1, because these are my x's. And I need to be consistent. Point 1, point 2. y1 minus y2. x1 minus x2. Now, when I see minus minus, I should think changes to plus. Now I combine, I get 5 over 6. That means go up 5, right 6. That's my slope. Okay, let's do another example. Let's say I have point C is 4, -3, and point D is 1, 9. So if I want slope, I'm going to do change in y over change in x. And I do want you working down, so change in y, what will I write? -3 minus what? 9. Do your y's. Over 4 minus 1. So I get -12 over, it'll be +3, which is -4. That would be my slope for that one. Any questions on how to find slope? All right, now let's do this one. What if I had point E is 4, 5, and point F is 8, 5. And I'm finding the slope. So I have my change in y over change in x. Well, yep, let's do it in steps. So it would be 5 minus what? And 4 minus, which is 0 over -4.
So you're getting a straight line, not just go right 4, or left 4.
Right.
You wouldn't go down.
Yep, it has a slope of 0. Top divided bottom, that's a slope of 0. This is very important. It is okay to have 0 in a numerator. That is fine. It just means in the end I get 0. So this has no slope. That's a flat line. It's horizontal. You're going to want to memorize that. Horizontal lines, and we'll actually put this in a let's formalize that on this next page. Horizontal lines. They have the form y equals some number. Their slope is what? 0. So y equals 2. Y equals -8. So on and so forth. They are all flat. They're horizontal. Horizon. Memorize. Now that brings us to the opposite though, vertical lines. So let's calculate a slope of a vertical line and just see what happens. I'll go back to that because I know you didn't get that. So go ahead and get that. Well, I draw someone's portrait. Who shall I guess? Someone not in here. Let's see if you can guess who this is.
Daniel.
No. This is coming out bad.
Ashton?
Oh. Yes, this is Ashton.
Got a lot of energy.
Yep.
You look crazy?
He had a bad day. All right, anyways. Let's go on. Vertical lines. Well, let's do a slope. So let's say point A is 4, -3, and point B, let's say that is 4, 7. So I find my slope. So that's change in y, so that's going to be -3 minus 7, all over change in x, that's going to be 4 minus 4, and I get -10 over 0. Can not have 0 in denominators. Again, you're going to want to memorize that. So what do I do? If I were to put this on my calculator is going to yell at me and say undefined. That's because this gives me infinity. A vertical line is a cliff. And you fall off it. And you plummet not to your death because you never reach there because it's infinite. You just keep falling forever. It's like that dream where you're falling and you're just like infinite and maybe you see weird things in the tunnel. Then you wake up because you're scared.
Did you study about that? Why you feel like you're falling in sleep? It's because you stop breathing when you're dying and your body jolts you awake. So you don't die. They did a whole study on that.
This is very grim.
They did a whole study on it. My old school, we had to do a paper on that. I don't remember what class it was for, but we did do a paper on that. And it just jolts you awake.
So that's why you kept awake. Have you ever had it where you're dreaming and you trip in your dream and your leg actually jerks? You trip. So then you wake yourself up with your own trip? I've had that several times. It's like wild.
My fingers, I know. No.
I've been like half
Thank you.
asleep and like I would like feel like something hit me. I'm like, oh my god, but nothing hit me.
That's what she's talking about.
Well, I'm not like falling.
You almost died, but you woke up.
But that's not like the falling thing. It's like.
But yeah, the dream where you're like falling and you might see some objects of some sort in your way, you know, your subconscious is doing something to you. But anyways, this is a clip, that's a vertical line, memorize. Now they have the form, very important, they have the form, my notes are so disorderly. They have the form x equals some sort of number, and that'll be a vertical line. But mostly what I want to work on today is actually graphing lines. So I'm hoping this slope stuff, you know, whatever, something you've done a lot, and actually graphing lines you've done a lot, but let's graph a couple lines. So let's,
Bless you. Thank you.
that is the weirdest sneeze I've ever heard. Let's say we have this. I need to solve for y. So when we did those literal equations earlier, there was a purpose. So how do I solve for y? Yeah, so we're going to add the 2x to both sides. Now I'm going to want it in slope-intercept form. So I'm going to write the x first. So I won't write 10 plus 2x, I'll write 2x plus 10. And now what do I do? Divide by 5. All of this, all, that's why we do that fraction bar, all of it divided by 5. So I'm going to have 2/5 x, any questions why I have 2/5 x? Plus 2. This is my line. So my slope is 2/5. And my y-intercept is, now the x-coordinate of any y-intercept is 0. So my y-intercept is 2, 0. And now we're going to graph it. But before we graph it, let's get some common sense. This is a positive slope. That means as I read left to right, the line is going up. I'll go back to it. So our y-intercept was 2. So I plot my 2 on my y-axis. And then my slope, so my equation was y equals 2/5 x plus 2. So I start at y equals 2. And I'm going to go up 2. And right, don't say over, because over is ambiguous. Do you mean over as in left or over as in right? No, it's up to right 5. Now notice, if I were to draw another point, I'd be off my graph. You could guesstimate where it is, or you could be like, all right, reverse this a little bit. See, there's my 5. and 2. So there's another point. Okay, I should have this staircase thing going on. And then I connect my points. Now your lines should be drawn through the points and have what at the end? An arrow. A green arrow. Okay, one person gets my mistake.
Green arrow, what is that supposed to mean?
It's a show, Green Arrow.
Yeah, I know that.
He's a vigilante who's a crime fighter. Or causes crime, depending upon your perspective. Oh, it's just a bad joke. It makes me sad. Or mad, depends. Alright, so I said I'd go back to this, so I will. Well, there we go. There was our line. We needed to solve for that. Alright, so let's do one more. I mean, I think you get the gist of graphing them. We do need to do a line puzzle. So let's say I have 5x minus 4y equals 12. And I want to graph that. Now, sometimes you're just given the line like the equation's already solved, and don't argue with it. You have less work to do. So we need to solve for y. We subtract our 5x. Now these do not combine. I do not get 7. They are not like terms. And this, if it's not written as a plus, copy down my negative 4y, because that's a minus. Then I divide everything by negative 4. Actually, I want to do another one because this did not work out the way I wanted. So we get y equals, now a negative divided negative is a positive. And then a positive divided negative is a negative. So this applies to everything, right? Just remember that negative 4 applies to everything. So now what's my slope? 5/4, which means up 5, right 4. Don't confuse that. The change in y, it's rise over run. And my y-intercept is the point. What's the x-coordinate? 0, negative 3. So I'm going to start on the y-axis at negative 3. And I'm going to go up 5, right 4. So this was my line in slope-intercept form. So now we are, I'm going to erase all this. Get rid of that. And we are graphing y equals, what was it? So we're going to start down here on the y-axis. For some reason, there's always one person who always plots their y-intercept on the x-axis. Please do not be that person. I'll pull out more here than I have. We go up 5. See, up 5. You don't need to do these arrows. But up 5, and then right 4. Up 5, right 4. Then I have my line. Put my arrows at the end. Now, in your homework, you are going to have to do graphs. I don't want to see 20 lines on one graph, one axis. So make one line per axis unless the directions say otherwise. I wanted to do one with a negative slope. So rather than go through the solving thing, let's just graph one that has a negative slope. So let's say in the end, after I've solved for y, I get y equals negative 3x plus 4. What's my slope? Negative 3. I might want to add the over 1. And what's my y-intercept? 0, 4. So I'm going to start at 0, 4. And from there I'm going to go down 3, right 1. down 3, right 1, down 3, right 1. Notice how I always start my graph going left to right. Even if it were to go off my page, I would do that just so that I make sure I don't mess up my slope and do it backwards. Don't graph them backwards. This should be like, this section would be like, yes, because we did so much work with lines in algebra class. All right, I think that's good. I'm just going to stop the recording. You can finish your...